For the most part, wrestlers only fight each other as part of the storyline that plays out in the ring. Every now and then, though, unchecked egos, misunderstandings, and just plain bad blood can break into legitimate backstage brawls that are anything but scripted. Here are the stories of some of your favorite wrestling superstars taking each other on in real life. He's been the villain of plenty of in-ring storylines, but a wrestler actually fighting WWE Chairman Vince McMahon is almost unthinkable, especially for a fan-favorite good guy known for pancakes, bootios, and high-flying stunts like Kofi Kingston. In Chris Jericho's book, Best in the World, at what I have no idea, he says McMahon decided to pick on Kingston during his rookie days, telling him on a plane, "Maybe you'll get over one of these days." In other words, the boss was taking a sarcastic jab at Kofi's popularity with the fans, or lack thereof. Jericho approached Kingston and told him he needed to fight back, and after some understandable hesitation, Kofi confronted Vince and kicked off some serious trash talk. That's when McMahon went for a legit double-leg takedown and a real-life wrestling match was on. A few moments later, McMahon picked himself up and started laughing, happy that Kingston stood up for himself. It clearly worked out for the high flyer of the new day, but for the rest of us, starting fistfights with your employer is probably a bad idea. The real-life battle between Goldberg and Chris Jericho was years in the making. In 1998, Goldberg was a megastar known for obliterating opponents in under a minute, while Jericho played an arrogant, obnoxious villain. Seems like a perfect matchup, but it never happened. As Jericho said in a podcast interview, Goldberg simply refused to work with him, and Jericho himself refused to lose on regular TV rather than in a more lucrative pay-per-view match. Years later, when both were in WWE, Goldberg confronted Jericho about rumors of some online trash talk. Insulted by the accusation, Jericho refused to back down. When Goldberg went for Jericho's throat, Jericho grabbed him in a front facelock and took him down with no trouble, in a real-life reversal of exactly the kind of quick victory that Goldberg had been known for in the ring. Before becoming one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, Shawn Michaels was one half of a tag team called the Rockers, alongside Marty Jannetty. By the early 90s, though, they were apparently sick enough of each other to throw down for real. According to an interview with Jannetty, Rowdy Roddy Piper instigated a fight between Jannetty and Michaels that Jannetty won quite easily, saying of Michaels, "He's a good wrestler, but he can't fight." The brawl was bad enough that the police were called, but Jannetty credits the legendary Randy Savage for keeping him from being arrested. The Macho Man told the cops the Rockers were simply practicing for a storyline, and the starstruck cops agreed to let Jannetty go in exchange for some autographs and maybe a couple of Slim Jims. Eventually, the Rockers would have their on-screen breakup. But after a stellar career, Michaels is a Hall of Fame legend, and Jannetty's name is unfortunately synonymous with the weaker half of any tag team. That's called winning the battle, but losing the war. Arn Anderson's 1993 brawl with Sid Vicious is one of the most brutal real-life fight stories in wrestling history, and it's a wonder both men are still alive to tell it. During a tour of Germany that involved a 9-hour flight, a 2-hour bus ride, a long night of wrestling, and another 10 hours on the road, the wrestlers were well past exhaustion and tempers were running high. At a bar, Sid offered up an opinion that WCW was losing money because of older stars like Ric Flair and his best friend Arn Anderson. Anderson understandably got mad, but a bar fight was avoided when cooler heads prevailed. For a couple of hours at least. Later that night, Sid broke the leg off a chair with intentions of clubbing Anderson with it. Anderson grabbed a pair of scissors, and this time, no one was around to break up the fight. By the time the other wrestlers separated them, Sid had been stabbed 4 times and Anderson over 20. The most amazing thing, besides the fact that they both survived and continued wrestling for years, Sid would later apologize, and the two men are actually on good terms today. When two 7-foot titans like The Big Show and the Great Khali decide to take each other on for real, you'd expect the knockdown drag-out fight to be literally earth-shattering. According to Show, however, their backstage brawl was, quote, the worst frickin' fight on the planet. While appearing on Chris Jericho's podcast, Show recalled that the fight with Khali broke out over one of Show's signature moves, where he'd throw his opponent in the corner, shush the crowd, then deliver a thunderous chop to the chest. Khali started doing the same thing, and Show was none too happy. When he confronted Khali, they began punching each other, and as Jericho put it, no one would break them up because it was like King Kong versus Godzilla. They didn't need to bother though. The fight soon ended on its own when Sho took a swing at Khali, tripped over a chair, and fell down, somehow knocking Khali over on top of him. The pile of giants then called the whole thing off. Of course, if you ask Khali, all the wrestlers took his side in the fight and he made the Big Show cry. That's almost certainly untrue, but to be fair, it's a much better story than "we both fell over." If you've ever had a bad time on an airplane, you can always be thankful that you're not one of the wrestlers on board 2002's infamous plane ride from hell. This legendarily awful flight across the Atlantic made headlines for a lot of reasons, and none of them were good. One of the most memorable was an alcohol-fueled mid-air match between the legendary Mr. Perfect, Curt Hennig, and a young but still terrifying Brock Lesnar. The details are hazy, but Hennig and Lesnar, both graduates of the University of Minnesota with strong amateur wrestling backgrounds, apparently decided to see who could come out on top in a takedown contest in the aisle of a 747, while flying at 35,000 feet. There are about 35,000 reasons that's a bad idea, but various reports say the two grapplers almost crashed into the plane's emergency door, which could have put a very bad ending on what was already a miserable flight for everyone on board. Luckily, that never happened, but Hennig wound up as the scapegoat, losing his job over the whole episode. Lesnar, on the other hand, was spared punishment. It turns out the WWE had pretty big plans for him.